If you're exploring egg donation or surrogacy, you know it can feel overwhelming. With so many choices, so many risks, and honestly, it's hard to know who to trust. But what if you could skip the confusion and learn the biggest lessons from someone who's been guiding families for nearly 2 decades?
Education in this process is so important. There are a lot of misconceptions about what is egg donation, what is surrogacy. This is not fast. This is not easy. It is a really cool way to build your family or to help somebody do it, but there is a lot to know in it.
That's Katy Encalade, our executive director here at Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions. For nearly 2 decades, she's helped families, donors, and surrogates move forward with confidence by focusing on ethics, transparency, and education.
One of our team members gave me the feedback that she was talking with a client just earlier this week. And he said, "You are the first agency that I've talked to that I didn't feel like I was buying a used car." And I was like,
Wow.
whoa. Um, because this should be a personable process.
Today, for our 100th episode, Katy shares 18 lessons from 18 years in this field, the red flags that should make you walk away, and why education, transparency, and support are the foundation of every successful journey. Enjoy. So, today on our 100th episode, we are sharing 18 lessons from 18 years in the industry with someone that has guided families through it all, our very own executive director, Katy. So, Katy, thank you so much for being here for this milestone conversation. With over nearly 2 decades, you have seen this industry grow and evolve. So, what is one value that you have found that makes or breaks a successful match? And how does Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions just make sure those matches last?
So, one value, I would say education, but if I could add transparency to that too and give you
Mm-hmm.
two, um, education in this process is so important. There are a lot of misconceptions about what is egg donation, what is surrogacy, be that because my mom's friend's sister did this 20 years ago and it looks
Mm-hmm.
so much different than it did then. Um, or just knowing the commitment involved in this process and the transparency piece of it. So, this is not fast. This is not easy. It is a really cool way to build your family or to help somebody do it, but there is a lot to know in it. And that's what an agency is there for, be it us at Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions or another great agency in the industry that values ethics and education. Um, so I think both of those things are really important in this industry.
Absolutely. When just jumping into that ethics aspect of it, I think you have a lot of, I know we just hear when we're interviewing individuals, like,
Mhm.
oh, where'd you find us? And they'll say Google or they'll say Facebook or, just all of those things. And like you said, this is not a fast process, but you're trying so
No.
desperately to get started. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit more about just why surrogates, egg donors, and hopeful parents should care about working with an agency that follows strict ethical standards? And how does seeds help protect families from any just unfortunate situations?
Yeah, so I'm really proud of our involvement with Seeds Ethics. It's an organization that helps guide and support agencies and industry professionals, and that gives families, egg donors, and surrogates the peace of mind that whoever they're working with is really working hard to abide by those guidelines and to serve people really well. So,
Mm-hmm.
basic things like clients can know that their money is protected when they're working with an agency and professionals that abide by those seed guidelines. They're actually coming out with new escrow standards right now to make sure that families are completely protected in this process. It gives, you know, there are situations where women are approved to go through this process, either as a surrogate or an egg donor, that maybe that's not the best choice for their situation or their body. Um, but they're kind of pushed through because people need surrogates and people need
Mm-hmm.
egg donors. And so families can know that when they're matched with an egg donor or a surrogate, that those agencies have abided by those guidelines. And so those egg donors and surrogates really do have the qualifications. They're not just a womb, or they don't just have eggs.
Right.
And that's important, that it's not just one more pregnancy, no more than 6 pregnancies. And yes, BMI is really important because that is going to affect how they respond to medications. So there's little things like that that are important that agencies abide by. And when you pick an egg donor or surrogate with one of those agencies, that gives you the greatest chance of a positive outcome in this process.
Absolutely. For, again, just hopeful parents, surrogates, and egg donors, what real protection does licensing provide that most people don't realize?
So, as you know, licensing isn't required in all states. But in the states that it is required, that means that these agencies have it together. They have policies and procedures in place. One thing that can be scary in our industry is anyone can start an agency. Anyone can
Mm-hmm.
decide that they're going to shift the field of law, or mental health professionals. Which is one thing that Seeds offers too, obviously, is the collaboration where people are learning and growing in spaces. So that alone could be a reason to be a part of working with an agency or a professional that's a part of Seeds. You know that they are being influenced by people that
Mm-hmm.
are doing this well. Um, but there's other type of licensing. Does an agency have insurance? For the average listener to this, they might think, really, why wouldn't they have insurance? No, there are some that don't. Like, I've sat on a board and realized, like, oh, some small agencies don't. Like, they should have insurance and the licensing that's required in their states just to do business. That protects families financially, their investment that they've made, that nothing's just going to come and happen. And it ensures, like I said, that they have a quality egg donor or surrogate that has been educated and that can move through this process with minimal hiccups.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that original value that you were talking about with transparency, how can families tell if an agency is maybe not following that value? Maybe they're hiding something.
Mm. I think uh, approximate wait times is one of those things.
Mm,
There should be consistency across the board and what that looks like. I don't think a family should ever feel hurried to make a decision.
yeah.
Of course, there are surrogates that will be gone and egg donors that will be gone. That's just how the process works. But no one should feel like, oh my gosh, if I don't pick this person today, I will never get to go through this process. Um, One of our team members gave me the feedback that she was talking with a client just earlier this week. And he said, you are the first agency that I've talked to that I didn't feel like I was buying a used car. And I was like,
Wow.
whoa. Um, because this should be a personable process. Um, People that are helping you should have some sort of personal experience or professional experience. One of the seed standards is knowing, like, who's behind an agency, who owns the agency, who operates the agency on a day to day. That sort of thing, I think, is really important for that transparency
Mhm.
in this process.
For sure. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, I'm really glad he had that experience with
Yeah.
us. Okay, digging into just kind of how things have evolved, we've seen the language and practice of egg donation shift from anonymous to unidentified, and what is a known cycle, and just all of those things. What does that mean? And why does the change matter so deeply for donors, parents, and donor conceived children?
Yeah. I think transparency is one
Hey!
of those things again. But yes, when I started in this industry, now almost 18 years ago, everybody said anonymous donation. Now, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
that had to do just where we were in the times. There was, I think we were probably pretty close still to like dial-up internet and, some different things like that. Like there was not Google reverse imaging. There was not 23andMe. There was not ancestry.com. There was also just not the research around how do kiddos feel that they came into this world that way. I mean, I would probably argue 20 years ago, I could do the research on this, there was probably still a lot of quote closed adoptions. So as the donor conceived community is older and is getting older, really that has been one of the largest changes as the donor conceived community has stepped out and said, hey, we'd like to know more about where we came from. Not necessarily that we want to build a relationship with that person that is biologically related to us. Some
Mm-hmm.
do, but more just like every human deserves to know where they came from and why they do what they do. And so I would say almost 10 years ago, we eliminated the word anonymous from our agency as a whole. We started talking to donors about you're going through an unidentified cycle. So we're not going to release your contact information to that family. Um, we're not going to release theirs to you. However, you should know that you could be found one day. So that was kind of the narrative for a long time. Hey, donor, are you comfortable being found? Like you should know somebody can do that research.
Yeah.
And now we've definitely, a little over 2 years ago, we rolled out our known donor program, which looks different. It allows a family to connect in the beginning. It allows that family and that donor to set expectations. Hey, what does a relationship look like long term, at least to the best of their knowledge right now? And really, more than anything, even if a relationship isn't developed, that parent is able to tell their child, like, hey, don't know what you want to do with this information, but should you be curious, here is this. So before you were here, we thought about you and we thought about what you might need at some point in your life. And for most families, that's all that they want. They don't know what their kiddo will want to do. They just want them to have the opportunity to do so. And so that's the piece that we support. Um, and it's been amazing. We have kiddos that are 10 and 12 that have come through, come about because of our program, and they have met their donors and they have gotten questions answered. And that's been really sweet and special to watch.
Yeah, for sure. It was Hillary and her daughter. We,
Yeah.
interviewed them a couple of times, and I think Hillary, she said something about how Corinne, I think she was drawing or something like that, and she was saying, "Oh, do you think my donor loves to draw too?" And the fact that Hillary was like, "Well, I don't know,
Yeah.
but we can ask her."
Right.
And just having the ability to have either the access to something as, fun
Yeah.
and silly as that, or the basics at least of just medical information is
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah. I mean, I've had families that have reached out because their kiddo had a reaction to, I think it was a flu shot. And they were like, was our donor allergic to eggs? Cause that can be a piece of that. And so, or it's just curiosity. Like that
Yeah.
helps Corinne know who she is as a person. And that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes more than love to create a family. It takes compassion, courage, and connection. At Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions, we've spent more than 18 years helping hopeful parents, surrogates, and egg donors create happy families through egg donation and surrogacy, one relationship at a time. Our team has been there. Many of us are former surrogates, egg donors, and intended parents, so we truly understand this journey. If you're ready to take the next step, visit createahappyfamily.com to apply today. All right, let's get back to the show. So once that foundation of trust, transparency, education, just is all established, then you have the journey itself, the matching, the decisions, the ups, the downs, all of it. And so this is where that support of an experienced agency really does make all the difference. For someone who is interviewing agencies right now, I know we've kind of touched on some of those red flags, but what are maybe some just bold red flags that should make somebody walk away immediately?
I'm friends with a lot of people in the industry that own agencies, and we talk about rhythms and what's going on and a part of a large mass. If a family goes to an agency and they say, we have so many surrogates, you should wonder why. Either
Mm.
they don't have a reputation with fertility clinics where they are getting a lot of referrals from families, because that is, there's no kickbacks with us. We don't make money when a fertility clinic sends a family our way, and they don't make money from us. They truly send their families to us because of the care that they know that someone is going to receive and the quality surrogate that they're going to have. So to me, it's a really big red flag if they're like, we have a ton of GCs waiting. You just should wonder why. That would not be normal in most agencies. I think an egg donation, a little bit the same. Like, if you can't talk to a human, if you can't talk to who's behind those donors and what is this process like and what is the timing, um, it might be a little more transactional, and people might be less educated and more likely for things to go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. This is not one of those things where we just talk to a robot or we just
Yeah.
Google and
Yeah.
click add to cart. Like, we need to
Right.
be talking to humans.
Yeah. Carvana seems like a really cool way to buy or sell a car. Back to the car thing. If you're picking a donor and it feels like Carvana, like click, point and click and have it delivered, that would be a red flag, because the kicker is, on the back side of this process, for a donor to be successful, she needs to be educated. She needs to know what she's going through. She needs to have flexibility. And and if she hasn't had that education, and if they haven't been personable in that process, then there's a good chance that she's going to back out, that she's not going to follow through. And we hear so many families, oh, I got halfway through the cycle and my donor backed out. Honestly, we have had one time that a donor has backed out, and it was because her mother had a cancer diagnosis. Like, because a lot of our staff have been donors themselves, or they've gone through this process to build their family in that way. And so we know what it takes, and we educate people on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's that number one thing that every potential surrogate should expect from her agency to feel fully protected and supported?
Transparent conversations up
Hey!
front. So, what do matching times look like? What are the qualifications? How many families do you have waiting? What is that matching process like? It should be clearly defined and laid out, not, hey, we'll have you matched in 2 weeks. They should be looking to be, I think, a part of that process rather
Mm.
than told what they're doing, but a part of, what is this journey going to look like for you over the next 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. Can you elaborate more on what you mean by a part of that process? Just again, in terms of that, this is a personal experience.
Yeah, so when someone says yes to being a surrogate, and in my opinion, and how our agency works and functions, they're not just saying yes to being pregnant and delivering a baby. They're
Mm.
saying yes to a journey. They're saying yes to a family. They're most likely saying yes to a relationship, and potentially a long-term relationship. I saw one of our surrogates just posted on social media, like, hey, I've been matched again. And she was matched like last week, and she was already saying, like, the sweet conversations and relationship that's already being built in such a short amount of time has been amazing for our family. And that's what we want. Like, we work with families for the most part that's what they want. And so many of our surrogates have beautiful, kind hearts that are not in it just to get pregnant, have a baby, and make some money. While financial is huge and can make a really big difference for a family and can make a difference in things that they could do for their family or not, or the opportunity to stay home instead of going back to, there's all sorts of different reasons why people
Yeah.
choose to be a surrogate. And the risk in the process, I always say, it's necessary. Compensation is necessary in this. But in our family's life, it was, we in our family's life, we say surrogacy was the best thing that we ever did. Of all the things that we've done as a family, like surrogacy is the best thing that we have ever done. And I personally want that experience for everybody that comes into this process. And so it is more than just being pregnant and having a baby for someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It is that relationship. It is taking the time to talk to you, Katy, and what are you looking for in a family? And you
Mm-hmm.
hopeful parents, what are you looking for in a carrier? And really not just pen and paper. Oh yeah, you guys align on these top 5 things. It's beyond that. It's
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And like you said, I mean, it is one of the best things truly that I know my family has ever done. I know you said your family's ever done, and it just continues to just bless you, whether it's,
Yeah.
the Christmas card that you get or going to Pace's baseball game or, all of those
Yep.
things. It just continues on
Sweet.
for sure.
It's sweet for sure.
Yeah. What would you say is the biggest difference between a donor working with an agency versus an egg bank?
I think knowing who you're helping, why are you
Yeah.
going through this process? How many families are you helping? Are a big piece
Mm.
of it as well. So, with an agency, you are matched with one family. One family sees your profile and says, "Hey, she seems like a great fit. We'd be really excited to tell our child one day this person helped us." And they pick her and she goes through the process and everybody's invested. Although you may not know each other and you don't have a relationship, you are invested in this process for one family. And you can choose to do this 6 times. So you could choose to have that same situation with 6 families. But when you're going through an egg bank, you're starting meds, you're having a retrieval, they're retrieving those eggs. To be transparent, they're trying to help 3 families with each time that you have a retrieval. Sometimes that happens, sometimes that doesn't. But they are taking those eggs, dividing them into lots, and then selling those lots to families. That can be helpful for some. It is a more cost effective way to go through this process. But as an egg donor, it's important to know that you are potentially helping 3 families each time you're a donor. And you could be doing that up to 6 times still. Um, and you're probably not going to have a relationship with those people. You're probably not going to hear if there was a pregnancy, where when you're going through a fresh donor program, when that family says, like, "Hey, we had a positive pregnancy," or "We had a delivery," we're going to relay that. We're not going to relay major information, but we're going to say, "Hey, there was a boy born in, September of 2025." And then that donor knows, like, "Hey, I really did help that family from that second donation and they had a kiddo." And so who you're helping, how many you're helping. And then that third component would be, how is your body treated during that process? Um,
Mm.
when you're going through as a fresh donor, their goal is for you to help one family. Their goal is not to get the most amount of eggs from you. Their goal is to get reasonable, mature eggs that can make a difference. Most egg banks, they make money based on how many eggs you have in order to know how many lots of eggs they can sell. And so, not every egg bank, not every doctor that stems a donor, but we have seen the donors that come to us who have been involved in an egg bank prior, their stimulation and what they produce is a whole lot greater than the average fresh donor cycle. And so But you know what? A donor could be really excited about being able to help that many families. That's great. It's just knowing what you're going into that process, and the
Mhm.
education piece is what's really important.
For sure, for sure. And to be more specific about that medication, when you're saying that those egg banks are trying to get as many eggs as possible, that means that they are going to really try and stimulate you. And so your risk of OSS, or yeah, OSS.
Yeah, OHSS
OHSS. There it is. There it is. Yes. So ovarian hyperstimulation
simulation.
um increases just big time.
Right, right. And it's I am pro fresh donor agency because I think it is what protects donors. You also have a legal contract in place. You have that availability to access information because I believe so much in transparency.
Mhm.
But for some families, they do need to use they do need to use a frozen donor because they can't afford the fresh donor route. For
Right.
some donors, that seems like a really good option. And there are also great doctors that are ethically stimulating donors through frozen programs. Um, but it is the underlying factor in the process.
Right. Right. Absolutely. It's, again, it's that experience. What experience are you
Right.
looking for? What is your why behind it? And when you have your why, what does that look like afterwards?
For sure.
More and more states are becoming surrogate friendly, which is
Right.
so exciting, but not every agency can work within those states. We kind of talked a little bit briefly about just, licensing and what that looks like. What sets egg donor and surrogate solutions apart in this realm?
So, not everyone can practice in those states because of the licensing requirements and the intense licensing requirements and what that looks like. So, New York licensing started 4, maybe almost 5 years ago. Um, and we were one of the first agencies that was able to be licensed there. And that's because our policies and procedures and practices were already in line with the ethical standards that they were asking for. We didn't have to draft anything new. We didn't have to make up any policies and procedures because they were already in place. And so that was important from New York. Same is true. And so New York was for surrogacy. Colorado was the the standards and regulation around egg donation, which really has mostly to do with no longer anonymous. So it is the only, no, there are like 3 states that requires identity at the age of 18. Colorado is just kind of one of the first states to say, hey, and we want to see how your policies and procedures are going to help uphold this standard of children having access, right? Because
Mm,
somebody has to keep that information.
yeah.
And so same was true. Our team was already working and functioning because we had already been doing known cycles, and because we've already been doing ID release for years. We had the systems in place in order to abide by those guidelines that the state of Colorado. So we were the first agency to be licensed in Colorado as well, which
So
is
amazing.
exciting.
And again, it's one of those things where um if you're going to choose to be part of this process, the agency that you work with is not where you skimp. These
Right.
things
Yeah.
matter, and having these questions or just this knowledge is always so helpful. When the journey is complete, obviously all of the beautiful things
Yeah.
happen, and we've already touched on how the impacts of that just last beyond contract. So let's talk about kind of the bigger picture. Can you, just what's a powerful example that you've seen where the relationship between parents, surrogates, donors has just kind of continued beyond the journey?
Oh, there are so many stories because community I've seen is more and more important in this process. And that starts during that journey and after. Um, I personally, and I know you, have really special relationships, and I could go down, everyone on our staff and um, the journeys that they've had and the special things that have come up in their worlds. Um, I love seeing people vacation together. Like, how sweet
Yes.
is that there is such a bond. And what's most fun is seeing children bond and what that looks like, or um, to have that extra extension of what those things are. I always laugh at, the family that I cared for, the little guy I carried, he's not even little anymore. Good gracious. He's 10. Um, he is so much more excited to see my three kids than to see me. I promise. Because that is the sweet, special relationship that is there. We've had a mom via surrogacy that um, her surrogate's child needed a stem cell transplant, and that mom donated like
Wow.
5, 6 years later. Like, she was a match in that process. Like, that's sweet. So there's amazing things like that, to just a surrogate or an egg donor's inclusion in showers and birthday parties and gender reveals, like those big milestones that people are included in. That it's really the picked extended family, I think, is what's been special to watch and see. As these families have gone through, you got to pick to work with somebody in this process, and now those are the really special people that get to help celebrate those milestones in their lives.
Yeah, for sure. I think you said community, and I couldn't help but think of some of our Illinois girls, or
Mm-hmm.
how we had our big 18th birthday party this year, and
Yeah.
it was two of my families that I coordinated for. They somehow figured out that they had a mutual connection with
Oh,
someone,
fun.
and now they're sitting there chit-chatting with each other about their experience, and just all of that. And so it really is one big huge
Yeah,
community, family.
it is. And that's special because families have gone through so much to get there. And, I've talked to family like, oh, none of my friends understand what infertility is or why we're using it.
Right.
So like that isn't something that they just talk about on Friday night when they're out as couples as dinner. They feel often families can feel like our story's not the same. It's not as easy, that. And so and that is why we had our birthday party, is because that allows families and surrogates and egg donors to be like, oh, you're someone else that went through this process, like-minded in a lot of ways, and definitely from a willingness to help and open up your heart to this process. And so that connection is really huge, and it gives just one more resource as they're walking through this. I've had families come back, most certainly through the egg donor conceived, like, okay, our kiddo's like 4 now, we need to start, kind of, what does that look like? Of course, we can give books and resources and things like that, but I've also been like, hey, I got a mama over here who has a 7-year-old who's, really killed it at explaining this and what that's look like. Do you want her number? Or I've got a dad that's doing this single dad thing, and would you like to talk with him? And so that has been really helpful, that others that have kind of paved that path and have walked that road are even willing to mentor and chat with other families that are in those new seasons, long after we have helped them as an agency.
No, definitely. You said single dad, and that got me thinking, how has just chosen single parents and LGBTQ families, how has that reshaped the surrogacy and egg donation landscape, and what impact has that had on the industry as a whole?
Yeah. Well, accessibility for all people to grow their families is so important. And
Mhm.
so I am proud that we help all different types of families. Families look different. And so I'm proud that we are able to help anyone who wants to build their family via egg donation and or surrogacy through this process. So I think it's probably been 10 years maybe since we've seen more and more growing in that way. I would say about 30% of the families that we serve are part of the LGBTQIA community, or single. So that has increased over the years. And that has, I think, honestly, that's increased with us because they now have more access to, there's great organizations like Families Out Loud that are educating and giving grants. And there are more grants that are coming out in this process. So it's becoming more affordable. It's becoming more widely talked about. People are educated more on it, where they might have thought like, this isn't possible for me, or what does this even look like? Because like we're not educated as children, what other options can be. And so it's finally like, oh, this is like doable and a process that we could go through. And we can find a great fertility clinic to partner with and a great agency and other industry professionals to walk us through this and it to be a wonderful experience.
Yeah, for sure. For someone that is overwhelmed and, just with how complicated the process can feel,
Yeah.
what's the simplest, most reassuring truth that you would want them to know?
Take your time. Just take the next right step. It doesn't all have to happen at once. Especially if you're needing an egg donor, or you might start with like, we need a semen analysis, and then we need an egg donor, and then we need a surrogate, and then what is delivery? And I've heard people be like, how are we going to explain this? There's a time for all of those things. There's education for all of those things. Find someone that, if it's not us, find someone who wants to walk with you, not drag you along, but who just will say like, hey, this is our next step, and answer your questions where you feel comfortable taking that next right step in the process.
After 18 years, what's the one thing that Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions has done consistently that has built that lasting trust with families and helped them take that next right step?
I think honesty in the process and what it looks like around education, cost, all of those things. The transparency with what is that process? What are the fees involved? The accessibility of our staff, from people that help through the matching and education all the way down to our coordination teams. Our leadership is here to support in every aspect. So just that piece, and a lot of that is coupled with experience. We've walked these paths. We know what it feels like to be overwhelmed with those decisions, or what it looked like to take that first injection, or what was it like when my GC had a miscarriage, or when I, as a GC, had a failed transfer. Like, not everyone, we haven't all experienced cupcakes and rainbows in this process. Actually,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many of us haven't had any, thing to come against. And so we're able to really walk alongside because we've been there. Our experience is not the same as everybody's, and it's important as staff that we remember that. But that experience, I think, is huge as we help people through this process. And I think that's what has built trust with the families, egg donors, and surrogates that we serve.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Again, we've kind of touched on, just some of those key things to think about and look for. But for someone who's just starting their search for an agency, what is the very first thing that they should look to know that they will be informed, supported, and celebrated?
Can you talk to somebody who is going to inform you, who is celebrating where you are? Does that person at an agency, do they spend time with you? Do they have experience serving families? Maybe someone doesn't have a personal experience. There are great people in this process that don't, but does their agency overall have experience? I've been doing this now for 18 years. I have no idea what our combined um, education, like if you combined all of our team members and how much but I'm going to say it's probably in the hundreds of, years of experience.
For sure.
Like so much, we've seen so much. And all the time we learn something new. Things change, things shift in the industry. And so we're able to pull on our experience and situations from the past to help us navigate with a family or with an egg donor or with a surrogate what those next steps are. And there are oftentimes, I love our coordinators have their collaboration meeting weekly where they take cases and they say like, okay, this is what's going on. We want to love, help, and support them through this process. What does that look like? And, you're able to raise your hand and say, wow, I experienced XYZ 3 years ago. And this is what was really, really helpful, or this is how we navigated what that looked like. With our agency, that's important for people to know that they not only have their one coordinator who is their direct contact all the time, but that coordinator has access to a leadership team, to other coordinators who are experienced. And so I would want that for every family, even if they're not working with us. If they go to an agency, most great agencies, they are going to have one coordinator. That used to be something that really set us apart. Like I would even say 5 years ago. But a lot are going to that model of one coordinator who will support you. But what is the support for that one coordinator? Do they have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people that they can lean on? Because one person can't know everything. They can't navigate through this process. And so them having a team ensures you have an even stronger team to go through this process with.
And that's one coordinator throughout the entire process, not just match, not just we got you pregnant or we got you through your cycle. It's literally through the whole thing until that very last hospital bill is paid.
Yeah.
You are supported the entire way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, most 6 months postpartum. I mean, that's huge. You're not left in this process. Yes. Yeah. The key part, that last hospital bill is paid.
That last hospital bill. Yeah. So we've looked back on, just 18 years and, just how incredible it's been, the changes that we've seen. But before we close, I would love to look ahead. What excites you about the next 18 years?
Oh, that is so fun. We are raising the bar in the way that people can be served and taken care of in this process. And there are other agencies that are doing that really well as also. That's one reason why I love our involvement with Seeds is that is more people that want to say, we want people to have a great experience through this process. If somebody's in this world, they know, they have seen, we've had probably in the past 18 months of things that have happened in the industry by not great players in this industry. And so, but I have seen more agency owners, more professionals just want to love and serve people really well through this process. And so I'm proud that I'm part of a leading company and industry that wants to do that because infertility sadly is not going away. The need for egg donation and surrogacy is not going away. So as more people face that decision as an option to build their families, we want to make sure that it's a positive experience on the backside because it can be. When people are educated, when expectations are discussed and talked through and met, people can end up on the backside of this and say, like, wow, I wouldn't have done it any other way. And I've heard Hillary say that before. She was like, I wouldn't have built my family any other way because, frankly, in her case, egg donation is what brought her her daughter. And that's really special. That's really cool that the kiddos that families end with are because of this beautiful process of egg donation and surrogacy.
Perfectly well said, and couldn't agree more. So, yay, happy 100th episode.
Yay!
My final question for you, and you know it's coming because you know I am never not in a meeting, exchange, anything without a cup of coffee in my hand. What has filled your cup today? Literally or figuratively?
Well, literally, you know me, I don't drink coffee. So I'm on the crazy
Sadly.
protein water kick, that perimenopausal place where we're supposed to be having ungodly amounts of protein every day. But honestly, talking to you was a real joy today. I love listening to the podcast each Wednesday when it drops, and you know, they're all amazing. The stories that we get to hear and the professionals that come on to give great advice are always so helpful. But it's been really fun reflecting on where we've been for the last 18 years, fun things, and where we're going. So I really appreciate you inviting me and letting me be a part of this time with you.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yay, happy 100th episode.
Happy 100th.